Now, Tiny Toon Adventures is not one of my all-time favorite cartoons, but the reason why I like to talk about this show is not only because it's good, but also because of how underappreciated it is nowadays. You can get the whole show on DVD, as well as streaming it on Hulu, but besides that, Warner never acknowledges the original show's existence in favor of Animaniacs. So in this video, I've done some research with the help of some other fans to create a Tiny Toon Adventures Iceberg. So basically how the iceberg works is that the higher tier is filled with the most well-known facts about the show, but the deeper the iceberg gets, the more obscure the facts are. With that out of the way, let's start off the video talking about the highest tier in the iceberg. The theme song. We're tiny, we're toony, we're all a little loony. These are the first lines of the Tiny Toon Adventures theme song. There's tons of uploads of the theme song on YouTube, whether they be remasters or crappy SMV videos. Tiny Toon Adventures Konami games. From 1991 to 1994, Konami got the license to make Tiny Toon Adventures video games for console. The most well-known of these games is Tiny Toon Adventures for the NES. Their games consisted of either 2D platformers or sports games. While the stories in these games leave something to be desired, the gameplay does make up for it, as these Konami-developed games were well received by fans and critics. These Tiny Toon Adventures Konami games have never been re-released, so the only options to play them is with emulation, or buying the cartridge secondhand and playing it on real hardware. If you are interested in buying the actual cartridges, they're very cheap to get. Fifi La Fume. This part of the video may upset some fans of the character, so if you want to skip my opinions and criticism on the character, go right ahead. Anyways, this is referencing an infamous fan favorite character on the show, Fifi La Fume. Babs and Sweetie are younger female versions of the iconic Bugs and Tweety, so making another female character based on an iconic male Looney Tune makes perfect sense. I swear there are more fans of Fifi than there are fans of the show she's from. This character is loved by many people, and here's the thing. Why? There's loads and loads of fetish and pedophilic art of that character, and there's a huge following for her, even back when the show was airing new episodes, and I just don't get it. Besides the summer vacation movie, there was almost nothing special about Fifi. While she's extremely far from being the worst character on the show, she is however shown to be one of the blandest characters, at least compared to other characters like Shirley the Loon or Go-Go Dodo. Maybe it's because I was never a huge fan of her Looney Tunes counterpart Pepe Le Pew, but regardless of what I think of the character, there's still a huge following for Fifi even to this very day. One Beer. This is referencing the final segment in the Season 2 episode, Elephant Issues. The segment is about Buster Bunny trying to convince his friends Plucky Duck and Hampton Pig to start drinking this one beer bottle together. There's a lot of things that I hate about this episode, like the fact that there's underage drinking in a kids show, and not only that, but they were drinking in public at a park. The segment ends revealing to all be just an act, so this segment thankfully never actually happened. It has been said that the segment was supposed to be satirical, but there's no real evidence to prove it. One Beer was just a really bad segment that I wouldn't recommend watching. It was so bad that it got Elephant Issues banned on Fox Kids, which kinda sucked because with the exception of One Beer, Elephant Issues was actually a good episode. I mean, they could've just replaced that infamous segment with an existing one, but I digress. Animaniacs. I know it's a very vague title in this tier, but I'm not referring to the episode from the show. I'm referring to the Animaniacs TV show from 1993 to 1998. Out of all the cartoons from the 90s, Animaniacs have been proven to be the biggest one that everybody remembers. Because of this, Warner Brothers tends to capitalize Animaniacs as a nostalgia show, as a way for them to say that the 90s were cool. Now, I think Animaniacs is a great show, but for a 90s cartoon, it never really did much for me. Some say that it's the best 90s cartoon, or the best cartoon ever made, but I just don't see it as that. I mean, we've got Rugrats, SpongeBob, Powerpuff Girls, Rocko's Modern Life, Dexter's Laboratory, and I can go on. But in all seriousness, I actually do like Animaniacs. It's a great show regardless, and hey, there's some Animaniacs icebergs on YouTube. There are some episodes that featured cameo appearances of Babs Bunny, Buster Bunny, Dizzy Devil, Fifi La Fume, Elmira Duff, and Baby Plucky. And that's it for the first tier. Now let's go a little deep into the iceberg to look at the next tier. Tiny Toons Looniversity. About a year ago, Warner Bros. Announced that they will reboot Tiny Toon Adventures as an HBO Max original called Tiny Toons Looniversity. Steven Spielberg will return as executive producer and will be released sometime around 2022. I'll talk more about this upcoming reboot later on in this video. Tiny Toon Adventures PlayStation games. This is referencing the Tiny Toon Adventures video games that were released on the Sony PlayStation. There are 3 games released on the PS1. The Great Beanstalk, Toonenstein, and Plucky's Big Adventure. The Great Beanstalk was released in 1998 and is a console port of a 1996 PC game called Buster and the Beanstalk. This is why the gameplay is a point-and-click adventure. What's unique about this game is that the original voice actors from the show reprise their respective roles. Toonenstein was released in 1999 and stars Furball, Plucky, and Hampton as the game's protagonists as they try to escape from the mansion of Toonenstein, played by character Elmira Duff. Next is Plucky's Big Adventure from 2001, where you can play as one of the show's 4 main characters in each chapter. I've never played any of these games, so I don't have any real opinions on these, but all 3 of these games have received mixed to incredibly negative reviews. Tom Ruegger. Despite having the Steven Spielberg Presents label, the show was actually created by a guy named Tom Ruegger. After writing some previous cartoons for Filmations and Hanna-Barbera, Tom was hired to work on the series. Some of the other shows he created are Animaniacs, Road Rovers, Hysteria, and Sushi Pack. Tom has also worked on some other shows, whether he was a writer, developer, or a producer. These shows that he worked on include Tasmania, Batman the Animated Series, Freakazoid, Pinky and the Brain, Pac-Man the Ghostly Adventures, and the 7D. Unfortunately, Tom has no involvement in Tiny Toons Looniversity nor Animaniacs 2020. He is, however, semi-active on Twitter. How I Spent My Vacation. This is referencing the direct-to-video Tiny Toon Adventures movie called How I Spent My Vacation. It's an hour-long experience that features different segments starring different characters. It was released in 1992 on VHS and Laserdisc and was met with positive reviews. In 2012, Warner Home Video released the film on DVD, and in 2018, the film was available to stream on Hulu, and still is as of 2021. Fast food toys. This is referencing the many fast food tie-ins the show has received. McDonald's released some toys for the show in both 1990 and 1992. In 1994, Buster and Babs were included alongside other popular characters like E.T., Snoopy, and the Muppet Babies in the Happy Birthday Happy Meal set. Also in 1994, Burger King released a set of Kids Club toys featuring the Tiny Toons. In 1997, Dairy Queen's released a set of 4 Tiny Toons toys. In 1998, there was a tie-in with Wendy's that included Tiny Toons toys in the kids' meals. In 2000, toys of the Tiny Toons could have been acquired at participating Carl's Jr. and Hardee's locations. So that is it for the second tier. Now let's dive a little deeper into the middle of the iceberg. Buster and Babs' cameo in Animaniacs 2020. Animaniacs 2020 is a revival of Animaniacs, but set in the present day. The show airs exclusively on Hulu and was well received by fans and critics. I don't like the show as much as the original, but it's a nice treat to watch. Anyways, in the show's second episode, the last segment has Dot Warner and the other cartoon characters fighting for the right to vote. Not only did it include cameos of classic Looney Tunes and Hanna-Barbera characters, but it also included Babs Bunny and Buster Bunny. No relation. They don't speak, and they do look a little ridiculous compared to how they're supposed to look, but it was still fun to see them in the revival. Food tie-ins. In the last tier, we talked about the toys from fast food chains, but in this tier, we'll be talking about the tie-ins with food products. One of the first food products for the show was the Tiny Toon Adventures cereal from Quaker Oats. While the box itself is well made, the cereal leaves something to be desired. Not only is it a ripoff of Post's alphabets due to the pieces being shaped like T's, O's, and N's, but they also tasted just like Cap'n Crunch, just with less sugar. Also, why is the cereal low in sugar? When you think of Tiny Toons, you don't think of health. The cereal was not well received by consumers, and generally wasn't that popular. No clue when it was discontinued, but probably only lasted about a year. There was also Tiny Toon Adventures Fruit Snacks, Heinz Tiny Toon Beans and Bites, and Tiny Toon Adventures Pasta by Libby's. Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain. So you probably know the Tiny Toon Adventures character Elmira Duff. And you probably know the Animaniacs characters Pinky and the Brain. In 1998 on Kids WB, Warner Bros. Produced and aired a spin-off series called Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain. This show was not very popular and received mostly negative reviews. If you're interested in the show, which I hope you aren't, The show is available to be purchased on DVD, and it's also available to stream on Hulu as of 2021. Spring Break Special. This is referencing the 1994 special Tiny Toon Spring Break. This was one of the only Tiny Toon specials made after the show's original run. It's a pretty fun watch despite its negative reception. It even features cameos from the Warner siblings. This special has yet to be released on DVD, but you can legally watch it on Hulu. Night Ghoulery. This is referencing the 1995 Halloween special, Tiny Toon's Night Ghoulery. It's another Tiny Toon special I really enjoyed despite its mixed reception. With the exception of video games, this was the last thing produced for the show. It hasn't been released on DVD and had an extremely rare VHS release. The special is, however, available to stream on Hulu. Elmira Duff's absence in Tiny Toons Looniversity. Cree Summer, the voice of Elmira, confirmed on Twitter that her character would not return as a major character on Tiny Toons Looniversity. While I'm personally glad that the show's worst character will not have a major role in the reboot, I do kind of feel sorry for Summer that one of her characters will not return. At least she reprised her role as Susie in the Rugrats reboot. And that is the middle tier, but we're not quite done yet. It's time once again to go deeper into the iceberg. Let's take a look at the 4th tier. Defenders of the Universe. This is referencing a cancelled Tiny Toons video game for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube. This game was planned for a 2002 release but was sadly cancelled. However, the ROM for the beta was leaked and is now available to the public. The game itself looks complete, even having different endings, and it could have been close to release if it was a little more polished. However, that never happened. Almost every actor from the show reprised their roles, including Charlie Adler surprisingly. More on him later. If this game ever released, it probably would have been a must-have title for fans of the show. Talking Buster and Babs plushes. This is referencing the Talking Babs Bunny and Talking Buster Bunny plushes released by Playskool. For a long time, we didn't have any footage of what their phrases sounded like. It wasn't until I bought the two on eBay and reviewed them to all who wanted to know what they sounded like. If you want to learn more about these plushes, go check out my review on the Talking Buster and Babs plushes. The Plucky Duck Show. This is referencing a short-lived spin-off called The Plucky Duck Show, which aired on Fox Kids for a few months. The show itself was mostly a compilation of episodes and segments starring one of the series' major characters, Plucky Duck. Lightning Rodriguez. This is referencing a mostly scrapped character from the show. Lightning Rodriguez was the counterpart of the Looney Tunes star Speedy Gonzales, but due to the criticism that the Speedy Gonzales cartoons were receiving at the time, the character was never fully implemented. As a result, he only made a few non-speaking cameos. Scary Dreams. This is referencing a Tiny Toon Adventures video game for the Game Boy Advance called Tiny Toon Adventures Scary Dreams. It was originally released in Europe around 2002, where it was originally called Tiny Toon Adventures Buster's Bad Dream. In North America, the game never got a wide retail release. It was released in 2005 near the end of the GBA's lifespan. It was only released in smaller retail stores and on eBay. Because of its limited run, Scary Dreams is considered to be one of the rarest and most expensive Game Boy Advance games of all time. Super Comboy ad. This is referencing a commercial that was played to promote the Super Comboy, an officially licensed South Korean release of Nintendo's Super Famicom in collaboration with Hyundai Electronics. I apologize if I butchered their name. The ad features not only characters from Nintendo, but also some non-Nintendo characters like Goku from Dragon Ball, Raphael from TMNT, Ryu and Chun-Li from Street Fighter, and Buster Bunny from Tiny Toon Adventures. The reason why Buster is in this ad is because the Super Famicom game, Buster Bust Loose, was promoted in the ad alongside other Super Famicom games such as Super Mario Kart. Charlie Adler's departure. This is referencing an event that took place during Tiny Toon Adventures' 3rd season. Charlie Adler had been the voice of one of the show's lead characters, Buster Bunny, for a while now. However, when he found out that he wasn't given a part in Tom Ruger's next project, Animaniacs, he was furious. There was another reason why he was mad at Tom, but I'll get to that later in the iceberg. To make matters worse, Tress MacNeille, who also voiced the lead role on Tiny Toon Adventures, got a lead role on Tom's new show. Charlie and his agent sent angry letters to Tom and the other producers, claiming that his treatment had been shabby and that he was going to leave the show. Instead of having the issue resolved just like what happened with Joe Lasky, the staff decided not to do anything about it, and as a result, Charlie Adler stepped down from the role, and Buster Bunny was recasted by John Cassare. You'll find Charlie's voice in most of the 3rd season. However, you can find a few episodes that have John's voice, as Charlie was able to voice most of his lines before his departure. Charlie Adler would never voice Buster again until 2002 when he recorded lines for the now cancelled Defenders of the Universe video game. In January 2021, Charlie Adler confirmed that he has yet to be invited to work on the Tiny Toons reboot. It is currently unknown whether or not he will reprise his role as Buster, but because of what happened almost 30 years ago, the chances of him reprising his role are pretty slim. We finally finished the 4th tier of our Tiny Toons iceberg. Now let's go to the deepest part of the iceberg, the final tier. Cancelled Funny Plushes. Kid Robot is a toy company that mostly makes blind box toys and stylized plushes. In 2019, they got the license to make toys for both Tiny Toon Adventures and Animaniacs. In 2020, they released funny plushes of the Animaniacs characters Yakko, Wacko, and Dot. Tragically, they were going to make funny plushes of Babs, Buster, and Plucky, but they were cancelled due to low demand. Dennis Falk. Now, this topic is a little too touchy for me to talk about, but Dennis Falk was or is a Tiny Toon Adventures fan, as well as a furry. The story goes that in 1994, he and his friends got a hold of Tress MacNeil's contact information and mailed her some obscene letters containing various sex fantasies about the characters she voices, such as Babs Bunny. As a result, Tress cancelled any convention appearances that was near Dennis's hometown, as well as cancelling her appearance at the Warner Bros. Studios store tour. In the Tiny Toon special Night Ghoulery, the show's staff made fun of him with the character of the world's biggest Tiny Toon fan, who asks if Fifi LaFume would get her own show. This unfortunate event has been commonly claimed to be the reason for the show's cancellation. However, that's not true, because the event allegedly took place in 1994, 2 years after the original show's run. Also, I'm pretty sure that an event like this probably wouldn't have really affected the show from cancellation. I've also heard another version of the story claiming that Dennis mistook Tress as the voice of Fifi without being aware that Fifi's voiced by Cat Susie. However, I couldn't find any evidence supporting this fact. This incident is probably the real reason why Tress MacNeil is not active on social media. She does, however, still appear at conventions. I think the lesson we should learn is that never stalk anybody, even if they are related to a character you like. Hitachi ads. This is referencing 2 Japanese commercials made to promote the products made by Hitachi. One features an animated commercial with Buster and Babs trying out Hitachi products. There's also another commercial that features the rabbits, but not as prominently as the first one. Cancelled Jaguar game. During the end of the Atari Jaguar's lifespan, a video game based on Tiny Toon Adventures was planned for a release on the Jaguar, scheduled for a release in 1995, but due to the Jaguar being discontinued in 1996, the project was cancelled. The only thing that survives from the game are screenshots and a beta demo. High Spirits. This is referencing a scrapped segment in the Tiny Toon Adventures episode, The Acme Acre Zone. A storyboard was created by John Smith and Bob Camp, who only worked on Tiny Toons for a few months until quitting in favor of joining Spunko, John K's animation company at the time. The segment starred Hampton and Go-Go as they arrive at a mansion where it's revealed to be haunted. The storyline was later reused in an episode of the Ren and Stimpy show, called The Haunted House, where the roles of Hampton and Go-Go were replaced with that of Ren and Stimpy. Lost retakes. Now, the animation in Tiny Toon Adventures can be a hit or miss, depending on which episode you're watching. Sometimes episodes are drawn to be on model and animated professionally thanks to studios such as Tokyo Movie Shinsha, while other times you get episodes that are poorly animated or have off-model character designs. I'm looking at you, Kennedy. But we're not going to be looking at character designs in particular. We're going to be looking at some scenes from different episodes that were reanimated in future reruns. Whether they be fixing some scenes with misplaced sound effects or replacing pieces of animation with different, smoother ones. The Season 1 episode, Luniversity Days, is an infamous example, where the original animations were made by Encore, while the retakes were animated by Startoons. There are other episodes whose retakes are currently lost, and it's unknown how many episodes have retakes, and whether or not they still exist. This is because ever since the DVD releases of the show, the episodes are presented in their original versions from their original airings, since most of the time, studios neglect to update their original masters with the newer changes. It was also a problem for Tiny Toons in particular, since the show kept moving networks. It was originally aired on syndication, similar to the other shows such as Transformers and the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. When Tiny Toons was in its 3rd season, the show was finally aired on a proper network, Fox Kids. The retakes took place when the show was airing on Fox Kids, and when the show moved to Nickelodeon sometime after the original show's run, the master tapes with the retakes were sent to them. After that, the show was moved to Kids WB, then Cartoon Network, then back to Nickelodeon, then Nicktoons, and then finally airing its last reruns on the Hub network. We currently have no idea what happened to the reanimated master tapes, as home video releases and streaming services all use the original master tapes from their original airings. We also don't know if Warner Brothers, Fox, or Nickelodeon still have these reanimated master tapes. It's been speculated that the reanimated master tapes were improperly stored, leaving the original tapes as the only ones in watchable condition. But we still don't know. If you want to learn more about this topic, there's an article dedicated to it on the Lost Media Wiki. Joe Alaskey's brief departure. Now this one's an interesting topic. When I posted an early draft of the Iceberg on the community tab, nobody suggested this topic, and I hadn't even heard about it until writing this video script. Charlie Adler, the original voice of Buster Bunny, wasn't the only voice actor on Tiny Toons who left during production, as Joe Alaskey, who voiced Plucky Duck in the show, also left for similar reasons. Like Charlie, Joe was not happy when he wasn't given a role on Tom Ruegger's new Animaniacs show. Now, when I talked about Charlie's departure, I said there was another reason why he left Tiny Toons. Well, another reason for Charlie and Joe's departure was that they were jealous that Tress MacNeille, the voice of Babs Bunny, was making more money per episode than both Charlie and Joe combined. Charlie and Joe went to Warner Brothers demanding for a higher pay, plus work on Animaniacs. They were both described as being very rude and insulting to everyone, and because of this, they were both fired. We already mentioned that John Cusero replaced Charlie as the role of Buster, while Dizzy Devil's voice actor, Maurice LaMarche, would replace Joe as the voice of Plucky. John and Maurice did Buster and Plucky for the last few episodes. However, all of Maurice's lines as Plucky were soon re-recorded by Joe Alaskey. Now you might be wondering, how was Joe able to re-record Maurice's lines if he was fired? This was because, unlike Charlie, Joe apologized to the staff for his quote-unquote rude and insulting behavior. He was thankfully forgiven and continued to voice Plucky for the rest of the show's original run, including the 2 specials. The last time he ever voiced Plucky was in 2013 when he recorded lines promoting Tiny Toon Adventures on the Hub network. On February 3rd, 2016, after dealing with cancer, Joe Alaskey sadly passed away at the age of 63. When Joe was asked about his brief departure, he said, "We had a money dispute with Warner's. We went to our agent and said, 'Jeff, we can't have this.' But Warner said that was it, and well, we walked off the show. Which I later regretted because apart from that, they treated me pretty well. But Charlie kept on walking and said some things, well, let's just say, he said some things he shouldn't have." When series writer and story editor Paul Dini was interviewed about Charlie's departure, he said, "There was a money dispute, and Charlie thought we'd get down on our knees and pay him more, and that Spielberg would insist we get him back. But when they went to Steven and told him how Charlie was behaving, screaming at everyone, he just said, 'Find someone else who can do the voice.' They sent over a tape of someone else doing Buster, and Steven listened to it and said, 'Fine, that guy's Buster from now on.'" Before I end the video off, I have a few bonus facts that didn't make it onto the Iceberg, but I still want to include them regardless. At the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 1990, alongside the Bugs Bunny 50th anniversary balloon, there was a Tiny Toon Adventures parade float featuring Bugs Bunny. Also at the parade were costume characters of Babs, Buster, Plucky, and Dizzy. I really hope these costumes still exist. It would be a huge shame if the Babs Bunny walk around no longer exists. After that, there was a new Tiny Toon Adventures parade float at the Pasadena Rose Parade in 1993, sponsored by Baskin-Robbins, who had a promotion with Warner Brothers at the time. On Twitter, Charlie Adler even posted a picture of him with Tress MacNeille and Joe Alaskey from the event. So that is the Tiny Toon Adventures Iceberg. What was your favorite topic we discussed? Or what topic surprised you the most? Feel free to comment below about your thoughts on this iceberg. And as always, thank you for watching.